Ready to explore the cutting edge of digital infrastructure? I'm Carrie Charles, your host of Let's Get Digital. Join me as we dive into the ideas, technologies, and leaders transforming the way we connect. From wireless telecom to fiber networks, data centers, and beyond. Sponsored by Broadstaff in partnership with RCR Wireless News. Now, let's dive in and let's get digital. Thanks for joining me today on Let's Get Digital. I'm Carrie Charles, your host. I'm glad you're here. My guest today is Joel Ogren. He is the founder and CEO of Assured Communications. Now, Assured Communications is a company that's building critical communications infrastructure all around the world. But what I'm most impressed with and excited to hear about from Joel is his Marine Corps experience, because I was also in the Marines. So, Joel, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you there, Maureen.
Yeah, absolutely. Hoorah.
Hoorah. All right.
So, Joel, talk about your path that, from the Marines and, what led you to Assured Communications. Tell us about that story.
Sure. It was like many of us as we grew up, the path where we are today was we had no idea, when we were young people, coming out of high school, etc. So I enlisted in the Marines at the age of 17. A few years later, I had put myself through college and got my EE degree and was nominated to go to the platoon leaders course in the Marine Corps. And for people that don't know what that is, it's a way for enlisted personnel to be selected and transition into the officer corps, another level of leadership in the military. So I was blessed to be selected into that program and became a communications officer about 5-6 years later into my Marine Corps career. So that was great. That's really where I started in that. Of course, back in those days, it was, and I know you were in the communications field also, Carrie. So you understand, what we were doing back then. We were still dealing with in the early '80s. We were dealing with paper tape and IBM cards. If anybody remembers those, large floppy disks, 8-inch floppy disks. DASD drums, all kind of silly stuff. And in the field, we're still dragging wire, running wire around the field, cranking phones, the old TA1s and everything like that, PRIC 25s, PRIC 77s, and now all before the enhanced communications modes that we have today. So that's where I got involved in it. I had intended to do that for about 4 years and then go back and be a cattle rancher back in South Dakota where I grew up. And 24 years later, I had not made that transition. So I stuck it out through almost 2.5 decades. So it was a great career. I retired out of the White House and then entered into a second career. So that was great. That second career, by the way, I ran a communications program at the White House, went into Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, did another career there effectively. I took a sabbatical from there to go over to DISA, so that's the Department of Defense's ISP, our global ISP, and I was asked to lead a program which was known as the Center for National Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications. So I had a very large budget that we executed on, built a team, delivered a global capability, and that in communications, right? Critical communications, high assurance networking, so networks that are not supposed to fail. And a lot of that is because we have redundancy built into our networks and our network partners out there all around the world. And that's really how I kind of got my entry into this field that Assured Communications is doing today. And that's why I named the company Assured Communications, because there's such a focus on those high assurance. How do you make networks not fail? What do you do? Because they are going to fail. That's the reality. No one should think I'm saying that there are networks that are perfect and don't fail. They all fail for lots of different reasons. And so what do you do to make sure that those critical nodes, critical communications, whether it's voice or data, cloud content, whatever it needs to be, can get from point A to Z appropriately? That's what we focus on. So it was a great background being in the military, frankly, because you get, as you know, Carrie, it's the whatever it takes mentality. You have to do whatever it takes to accomplish the mission. We bring that into this company, the people that are here. I know we're going to talk about the people later, but that's critical to this kind of business.
So Assured Communications has grown well beyond a consulting firm. And talk a little bit more about just all the services you provide and the global work that you do.
Yeah, the joke I tell everybody is I really started this company to kind of semi-retire, just kind of do some light consulting. Initially, I had a lot of recommendations from folks. I was trying to make a decision on whether or not I was going to go back to Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab or do something else. I started this, but things got busy very quickly on a global scale. There's a lot of need out there, a lot of projects and opportunity. And that's where I really started bringing on and just growing the company. It just happened naturally. I learned the value of having key partners that you can trust, trusted partners out there. That's absolutely critical for any business. And we also wanted to earn their trust. So that's the two-way street. So just the knowledge and the experience of having worked globally and meeting those people. They might have been in uniform also in a prior life, but they're still in the field just like I was. And so already had a really strong series of relationships around the world. And, you just keep bumping into those people out there, and they're good people, they're solid. And that network has grown significantly. There's just a lot of great people in the industry, wherever they grew up in it, that are out there making a difference.
So Joel, you've really built a reputation of looking at infrastructure through a much wider lens than just technology. So you see it through a lens of economics, politics, regulation, risk. Why is it important to have such a holistic view?
It's a great question because this comes up so very often. In today's world, you have to take in you have to have a good solid base of understanding of all of those, because all of those topics are going to impact your projects today. I think that if a company, a customer doesn't have a team that can look at that and that where you can fit in and participate in that, you're going to have a lot of challenges. So they're going to come up. So specifically, when you get into the regulatory environment, what we have from a regulatory environment here in the U.S. doesn't mean it's dissimilar anywhere else around the world, any other country, but it is going to be different. There's going to be different timelines, different requirements, different licensing requirements, et cetera, impact on taxes, all of these things that you really have to look at. How can you be efficient across all of those when you're working in multiple countries? So a lot of that comes from, again, some of the experience, but I think there's a lot of communication that needs to happen. Everybody knows this when you get into a project, to not only meet the leadership of the communities that you're going to be in, but get out there and meet some of the people. The world is full of disinformation due to our social media platforms. And so setting the record straight early and often, helping people understand what you're doing, what you're not doing also, right? The value of this, how this can help maybe their generation or future generations, and what the impact of that is. I think having good, positive conversations around that. And there are some tough conversations that happen, because these type of facilities, they take land and they impact power and water and all of that. And those are all good conversations to have. So I think you need to understand the current state of the politics, the regulation impact, environmental permitting, historical, cultural, all of these things that you deal with in developing projects and taking them to a successful conclusion.
So your projects span subsea, terrestrial, satellite, policy. When you're taking on something that is this complex, where do the surprises come from? And maybe give an example of that too.
If we've done a good job at the topic that we just talked about, that holistic view, you should be well prepared coming in. Most of the surprises are coming in when I have customers that are so risk averse on a project that they end up impacting the project negatively as we go down the line here. And what I mean by that specifically is there's project risk, right? Permitting risk, as an example, permits and environmental approvals, they just take a long time. It doesn't matter where you're at in the world these days. I mean, you're looking at 18, 24 months, 36 months sometimes. I say quite often, I can't wait to get to the part where I can put a shovel in the ground and go build something. That's almost the easy part, because I've got, 2 law firms and a lobbyist maybe working on just trying to get the environmentals and the permitting process through, along with obviously coordination with the local communities. But the challenge that we face here and the surprises are the fact that people don't really understand that that's part of the path that we're on right now. So I think, and maybe it's an experience issue, They don't believe it. They're being told something else from somewhere else down the line. They believe somebody else can do it faster, cheaper, et cetera. These things just take time. You've got to be a bit of a squeaky wheel. You've got to know what you're doing. You follow the process. It's a phrase I use a lot with my team: follow the process. The process works, right? And we adjust from that. But what's surprising is how much risk can be put on a project by not making decisions in a timely manner, because that costs money. It increases costs. Products, steel costs, a war kicks off, right? And all of a sudden, anything that has anything to do with the cost of oil, lubricants, et cetera, over there drives prices up. So that puts a lot of financial risk on the developers. It puts financial risk on project implementation, the finance, the budget of the whole project. So moving out smartly, executing a project. If you believe in it, execute, cross that line of departure.
So a lot of companies sometimes are afraid to tell clients the real hard truths. And you talked about, when I think I met you at that conference in Metro Connect, you talked about stopping a project before too much money is spent. So what does this level of honesty take or require from a leader?
Well, I think this is part of that trusted partner, from the start, right? We have to have those hard communications. And a good example of this usually occurs, there's a series of, I call it as you're on the critical path on the project, right? So that path is made up of many things. In the early days, I have clients that want to tell me where we should land a system or tell me where we should build something, and they've really not done a proper feasibility analysis. They've not looked strategically at, where is the power? If we're bringing cables in from offshore across the ocean, you can't just point at a place on the map and say, we're going to bring it in right there. There's a lot of stuff going on offshore. We have to evaluate that and look at that. That takes time. That requires resources. We have to, wherever we're going to build the facilities, that needs to be in proximity to that landing point. So there's a lot of things that have to be done right up front. And if they've looked at a map and said, we want to do something right here, or they've already purchased a piece of land, sometimes I usually been successful in saying, let us look at a broader range on the map here and help identify that. It's just a lot of hard geologic engineering, frankly, at the beginning to make sure that we can deal with that. You have to deal with earthquakes, tsunamis, soil inundation, soil liquefaction. There's a lot of things that can happen and make that site untenable. And you don't want to be spending money and losing time, frankly, in today's world by not being honest about that. In other words, if I just accepted the truth or the location that somebody recommended without having addressed all of those concerns, they still tell me to go anyway, we'll do that, but we'll make sure that risk has been defined and outlined right up front. But sometimes there are reasons to stop a project as you go along. And I think you can define that risk in your project profile where it's worthwhile spending some money up front. It's not usually a lot because you're not in the construction phase yet, but it's better to pause and regroup and perhaps look at another location that's more tenable. Maybe we can get more power or better access, et cetera, to utilities. So that's an example of that situation.
So Joel, Assured runs with a very lean team, and you mentioned a couple of times that you lean on partners. Yeah. So how do you keep that quality, trust, accountability high in this type of model?
Well, we hold each other accountable for sure, but most of that comes from these relationships that have been developed over decades now and working with people and having worked with them on other projects. You know that you have a good working relationship. You know that you can work well together. We know everybody understands delivery, the economics, and the risks. We take all those risks together. We make sure that we understand them and we communicate well. So understanding that project schedule, the economics, and everything we have to do around project delivery is key. People that, understand the whatever it takes mentality. And that's not to say that we're doing that, and we're going to take a loss, we're going to do anything like that. It's just being upfront, communicating the challenges as they develop and are defined to us, and executing together with a team that knows how to get it done. You solve problems, and you execute. And as long as you walk into that knowingly, I think it's been a good experience that way.
How much harder has global infrastructure delivery become as geopolitical pressure, regulation, stakeholder complexity, that all continues to rise?
It's hard because it creates risk in a project, and it's different types of risk. Up front, everybody wants to define the financial plan for the project, the pro forma, if you will. How much capital do you need to build this? What's it going to cost to operate and sell, et cetera? What's the valuations? What are the returns? So the financial risks are weighed very, very heavily. That creates, then you have project risk during the development phase, the construction phase, pre-construction and construction elements. And that's where all of those permits, environmental work are being done. So if those things are taking longer than expected or longer than planned because you weren't honest about how long it takes, or you weren't aware of it, or you just identify the fact that, hey, now it's taking longer because of X, whatever that X might be, you have to look at what the impact to that project is, and is it a budgetary impact? Is it impact on the customer? Customers often give you timelines and say they want to be up and operational by X time. And so we're all working together to try to achieve that. So I think it's mostly around certainty of, and the risk associated with the finance project, both pre-construction and construction elements, and then moving forward into the operations and maintenance. So that is getting harder across the board because there's so many things going on that could impact your project. I gave the example earlier, impact on the war in Iran and impacting cost of fuel and all cost of supplies, impacting the financial markets, et cetera. So gets everybody on their toes.
Do you think that the world is taking infrastructure resilience seriously enough?
I think, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a crisis for people to pay attention to things. That's a little bit inherent in our psyche because if there hasn't been a crisis for some time, people will stop believing that we need to put some money into a budget to address things like resilience in your network architecture, or we haven't had any kind of seismic activity, an earthquake, in over 100 years. So those 100-year charts, they're not good. We're not going to build into any seismic capability into our design, et cetera, even though we're due for something, right? You don't want to claim doom and gloom, but you also want to be prepared and be able to develop and design to the right standards and address these kind of things. So I don't think anybody sleepwalks into risk. I think that both in the project development phase and a project implementation phase, all the parties need to be able to have open discussions about those elements of risk. Again, what we just talked about, project, financial, supply chain, all of those activities. When there's a strong partnership or a team and approach to risk itself, and you can have those open discussions, I find it much easier to navigate the challenge as they present themselves.
You're expanding into Asia. What are you seeing in that market that's really important for your next chapter?
There's just a lot of growth in Asia, partly because AI is certainly driving everything globally, but the cloud players, the neo cloud entries, there's a lot of new entries in that space. There's just a rapid acceleration in growth. And frankly, what's happened in Asia, the Asian countries and governments are taking advantage of these opportunities. They're identifying significant amounts of power for particular areas. They're trying to drive GDP growth, frankly, through technology into particular areas, and they're trying to manage it, which I think is great. They're trying to kind of put some of these in like technical corridors, if you will. So whether it's data center or any other kind of industries, they're trying to group these a little bit and frame them up and make sure they have the right resources, both not only the land and the power and the connectivity requirements, but also the regulatory pieces. So everybody's really working hard to try to have that growth occur within the boundaries of their country, right? And then in specific areas as they manage it. So Asia in particular, it's booming. You have the largest populations on the planet, kind of very centralized around Asia. So that's where the basis for a lot of that growth, and a lot of connectivity, obviously, between each of the continents to connect into Asia and take on that business. A lot of great people there. They're smart, they're working hard, they're leaning forward over there, and they've been great to work with as this acceleration continues to ramp up there.
With projects and missions this intense globally, how do you build and maintain a culture where people want to join and stay?
It's a great question. I say this all the time. I am really blessed to have the people on the team that I have. I've got a very, very diverse workforce here. They're willing to jump in and help each other out. They're extremely experienced personnel from across the industry. We're international now. We're on 3 continents with these folks. Our headquarters in Northern Virginia, and we have a small cadre of folks that come into the headquarters there. But we have people in not only Virginia, but where our headquarters is here, but we have people in Texas, Florida, Colorado, Washington State, plus our European headquarters in Sweden and our newest headquarters in Singapore in Asia. So many of these people have had multiple roles throughout their career. Sometimes some of them started in sales, some of them started more technical, don't want to be technical anymore. I get that. I love the technical side. But, one of the key things that I look for is not only bringing that experience to the table that all of these folks do, but they have demonstrated their ability to work both independently, especially if you're going to work remotely and be part of a team that kind of operates remotely. Some companies operate 100% remotely. We're not quite there, but we often work remotely. But they also have to be able to step in and work in a team environment. So the tools that we have, cloud-based SharePoint, where we can get access to everything from anywhere securely, obviously, which is important. We can share those with customers very easily, using those tools, right? And then the virtual meeting tools like we're using today, right? So we use Teams, we use Zoom, and I don't know what this platform is. It says Riverside. Riverside. But there's a lot of great tools, just like we're using for this interview, that are out there that we take advantage of. And that helps. Flexible work schedules are key to allowing people to work remotely, because I think as long as you're getting everything done and you're a team player and you're helping out, you work your schedule. That fits well with people. They like that. They like the flexibility. They also like the autonomy that comes with that, where, you get treated like an adult, right? You have expectations. You're supposed to deliver. And if you don't, you get to talk to me. So I think when everybody gets in that groove, right, you kind of make it happen. And that's, it's a beautiful thing when you see that working well. And it's a beautiful thing for me here. Got a great team. Like I said, I'm very blessed with it. But everybody gets on board very quickly to that. And the people that have come here, they've expressed to me they enjoy this platform that we've developed here. And it's been through their input. I'm definitely not all the brains here. So we have a lot of great input from everybody on this team, and we take that seriously, and we try to build a better mousetrap here on a daily basis.
So let's talk about the future. What's your long-term vision?
Let me walk you through a little history, right? So I told you a little bit about how the company started. So it started as a consulting company. We very quickly built a platform around service delivery and all of the elements from, feasibility strategy, desktop studies, if you will, right? All the way through pre-construction, construction activities, operations, maintenance, and sales. We added all of those because these were things that customers wanted, and we built a platform around that. We've got the financial back office and the back end to support, the sales activity on behalf of the customer that they've enjoyed. So wherever we've seen a pain point, we've looked at it and seen if we can address that ourselves. We also have moved, just with the growth of the company, to owning and operating some of our own assets. So we wholly own our asset in Europe. We're looking at adding more to our portfolio. We're getting into more partnership where we have an equity position, an ownership stake in projects that we develop. We like having skin in the game. That's a phrase that we use as we participate. Sometimes that is not the discussion in the beginning of the arrangement, but oftentimes when we've proven our value and proven that trusted partnership, that's a good way to show that that we're here for the long run. We want to be here for the long run, and we're going to continue to grow. So that's our goal.
Joel, this has been wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm sure I will see you again soon.
I hope so. Appreciate it very much.
Yes, you take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Let's Get Digital. This podcast is powered by Broadstaff, a national staffing firm specializing in digital infrastructure talent. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join me next time as we explore more stories at the intersection of technology, talent, and transformation. Until then, let's get digital.